You're listening to the Subrogation Support Network, a podcast from Mattison, Wickert & Layer, America's subrogation law firm, with dissemination of new developments and changes in subrogation law, as well as emerging trends and best practices. Here's your host, Ashton Kirsch.
Hello, everybody. This is Ashton Kirsch, your host with the Subrogation Support Network podcast. Today, it is my pleasure to host and have as our guest one of our attorneys, Anna Zabalgotia, joining us to discuss the really interesting topic of artificial intelligence, AI. We'll talk machine learning, ChatGPT, several other things that are really kind of taking not just the world, but also to a micro level, the insurance industry by storm. So, Anna, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great. Well, Anna, why don't we start by you're telling us a little bit about yourself and your practice with the firm here at MWL.
So I've been with the firm for a little over a year now. I handle primarily a pretty heavy civil docket of defense cases. I understand the firm is, our bread and butter is subrogation stuff. So I have a smaller docket of some subro cases, but for the most part, I practice insurance defense. And I've been with the firm for a little over a year.
Yeah, and for the record, this is the Subrogation Support Network. Many of our attendees and listeners are subrogation specialists, subrogation attorneys, but we also have, a huge involvement and a lot of interest from those outside of that. So yeah, your experience in liability defense and defense work, it is fascinating, and it's hugely important and very influential in our conversation today. So Anna, thanks for all that you do.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So Anna, let's start with, tell me what caused you to have an interest in recent developments in artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so I guess a lot of it grew as a function of probably my own personal consumption, and just the way that I'm on a group chat with my mom and my sisters, and we send each other memes, and in a lot of ways, a lot of relationships are maintained. Friends from El Paso, where I used to live for a little bit, we keep up with one another by social media and sending each other memes and gifts, and so my own personal consumption of social media and our legal understanding and background of how policies are shaped, the kind of that bridging that gap between how are we using technology, how are we using social media, and what are the laws to kind of govern that and keep up with that. That the intersection of those two things was kind of what sparked a lot of my interest. But then, I kind of stumbled upon, I think a lot of people saw The Social Dilemma. And the creator of that, his name is Tristan Harris. He has a podcast that I really enjoy listening to. And he was kind of the spark that kind of grew my curiosity. And so, yeah, it's just kind of been fueled by more and more, and obviously ChatGPT and stuff that's come out more recently has just kind of fueled that. But definitely my own personal consumption of TikTok and Instagram and just that mass proliferation of it has been just interesting to me. And
yeah, the technology is just fascinating. And I feel like this is, everyone always says that, this is the new technology of the future, and this is going to change the world. They said it with cryptocurrency, right? Which, I think is fascinating. I do own some Bitcoin. I actually have Bitcoin miners, but I'm also not convinced that that's like a true paradigm shift. That said, I feel like this has the potential to. The power is incredible. And we'll discuss some examples. During this podcast, and I hope that you're good with us going into ChatGPT quite a bit. Bard, which I believe is the Google's version. just how AI impacts even from everything from automobiles to drafting letters to how we use our dishwasher, right? I mean, it's applicable just kind of so across the board. And I do think that this actually, in my mind, has the potential to change everything, change the way we work, change the way we make money, change the way that we shop for groceries. I mean, it can be everything.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So just at a basic level, what is artificial intelligence?
AI is a pretty broad term that refers to systems or machines that mimic human intelligence. That's basically what it is. And, there are subsets of AI like machine learning, which is building systems that learn or improve based on the data that they're given. So, your Siri or Alexa, the more that you talk to it and engage with it, it kind of learns your preferences and kind of grows with you. I'll also just preface this whole discussion by saying that I'm not a computer science expert by any means, but in general terms, that's what AI is.
Understood. No, I mean, that is how I would understand it as well. So I've played around, like as soon as Chat GPT, and I read the first story on, I also listened to kind of a tech podcast that actually is a lot about kind of cryptocurrencies and different future technologies. And this came out way before it started hitting the news. And I was one of the, in the first few days of it being released, I was playing around. I got in there and there was a huge wait list. And I mean, the technology it's truly amazing. I would encourage anybody who hasn't played around with Chat GPT, Bard, or one of the other kind of AI, more one of these platforms. I mean, it is wild. I mean, the things that I did is so my wife would kill me for telling this story, but I guess we're all friends here. So Valentine's Day, I always write a beautiful letter to my wife, as we all should be doing to our significant others. And I am, well, I guess, to be honest, Anna, law school destroyed my creative writing ability. So my letters are very nice, heartfelt, but they're not that beautiful. I mean, my prose are not, there's no artistry to it. So I figured what I was going to do is was going to write one letter from myself, and I was going to let Chat GPT write a letter where I inputted a prompt of write a love letter to my wife, and I put maybe 2 sentences just about who I am, who my wife is, about our family. It generated a 1.5-page love letter. I mean, it was just incredible. I mean, it was 10,000 times better written. And I'm like, I can't give this to her because it's going to make her cry. It's going to be amazing. And then I'm going to have to tell her that a computer wrote it and she's going to be devastated. And frankly, I'll probably be sleeping in the basement for a while. So I didn't, but I let her read it after the fact and said, hey, I did this. And it was incredible. I mean, just the fact that a computer can, I guess I'm a lawyer, so we're not known for our emotional fortitude. But the fact that a computer was able to write with emotion was incredible. I've played around with it, and I actually had it write some bedtime stories for my son, where legitimately I said, my son is a 3-year-old boy. He loves monster trucks. His favorite monster truck is Gravedigger. Here's some stuff, and I gave maybe 15 seconds of writing of prompts, and it legitimately wrote a 10-minute bedtime story. All about my son adventuring a monster. It's incredible. I mean,
I mean, that really is one of the, I mean, immediately you just are impressed by how fast it can spit things out and kind of feed you like anything from a bedtime story or a love letter to, make me a recipe with lemon, salt, and vinaigrette. That's all I have, it really has been impressive just how fast it can give you what you're looking for at your fingertips. And I think that's probably the main way that it's going to impact, or that I think that it will impact the legal field, just as it will for other professions, which is to make it more efficient for everyone. What would otherwise take hours to do can, within seconds, it will I'm thinking back to last week. I had a depo of an expert, it's a pain specialist, and I can, type in, draft me 20 questions to ask a pain specialist expert. And of course, I mean, I'm going to have to, cherry pick which ones I want to use and how I'm going to, order those questions and build my facts of the case into, my deposition questions. But, how quick, what would otherwise take hours is now just minutes, seconds. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And I even messed around with it, start asking questions for specific subrogation advice. And the funny thing is, in looking at it, it was ChatGPT had given me all of this this research, right? And you look to see the language, and actually a lot of it pulled from our website. So I'm like, you know what? I wrote that, right? I wrote that blog post or whatever it could be. So it is interesting in that regard. And also, I mean, I used it to just messing around. I had it write up some marketing letters to clients just to see, hey, do you think it can be better than what I already made? And it sadly was, right? And I implemented quite a bit of that. So I have actually used this technology in that regard. But you're saying that you've actually used it to help generate be it discovery responses or requests or things, depo prep in your practice. And that's fascinating. Is that is that right what I'm hearing? And what else do you think it can be used for?
Well, that's definitely been, that's probably the most recent example. I had a case where I had a hearing. The insurance company I was representing was not a party to the litigation. And so, I wasn't familiar with the underlying facts or, all I knew is that we did not want the court to grant non-party discovery for an arbitration decision. And so I can type in there, draft me the pros and cons of arbitration decisions being confidential. And it just, here are the benefits, here are the advantages. And so it kind of just sparks different creative ideas and arguments that obviously I'll have to, find the case law to support it. But even from that kind of bird's eye view, big picture, what are some themes or, just creative arguments. And I've learned too, I mean, how you actually, what you're telling ChatGPT to do, the prompt itself is really important, and I found more helpful feedback from it when I'm asking it like as a command almost, like, do this, draft me this, prepare 10 questions on this subject, versus like, what is AI? Or, kind of an open-ended question. It doesn't give me as helpful feedback. So the way that you're phrasing the prompt and asking ChatGPT to help you does kind of produce better outcomes, which I'm still learning. And I think that's kind of one of the things that I think is beneficial in this discussion that we're having and with other attorneys is, what are they doing? What's working for them? What are examples of ways that this has helped them in one way or another, whether it's preparing for depositions or creating crafty arguments for, persuading the court. I'm curious to see what is and isn't helpful for other attorneys.
Yeah, it's a fascinating starting point. I mean, I'm playing around with it, sitting right here while we're talking. And I just asked it here's the prompt. Write a legal opinion on whether economic loss doctrine will apply to a claim in Wisconsin, right? Not giving facts. Let's see what it says. It generates for this for me. I am writing to provide you with a legal opinion of the applicability of the economic loss doctrine to your claim in the state of Wisconsin. Economic loss doctrine is a legal principle that limits circumstances under which a party can recover purely economic damages in tort negligence claim. Goes on more there. And then in Wisconsin, the economic loss doctrine is well established, has been recognized by the court. The doctrine precludes a party from recovering economic damages in tort claim where the loss arises from a contract or breach of warranty. Key factors and considerations regarding the application. Then it gives a list of 5 key factors, a conclusion, everything here. Obviously, you need an attorney to review this, but this is kind of super helpful as a starting point for especially adjusters and other folks that may not know the law. I mean, obviously, they can't give legal opinions, but it's scary how much work this would have taken an attorney to draft or a professional to review and draft. And here it is, just sitting right in front of my face, which would need to be reviewed for accuracy. And I'm looking at it, and frankly, it actually is totally accurate in reviewing what it's providing me. But it's wild. I mean, the fact that just something that would take hours just took me 5 seconds, right? I mean, that's cool.
Yeah, and I'm curious to play around with, what Westlaw is going to do with it, because it seems like, I think we've all heard of the infamous New York case or I think he was in New York. It was an attorney who had ChatGPT write a brief for him, but all the case law was completely manufactured and not real case law. And he was ultimately sanctioned by the court and, embarrassed on a national level. But, that's just not doing your homework or just trusting that ChatGPT is going to feed you real case law. And in fact, it was made up. But I think that the capabilities of how it will improve our efficiency is just, it cannot be understated, and it will free up all that time to do more and, in turn become more profitable. But yeah, it's definitely, trust but verify.
Yeah, it's a tool. It's not necessarily a total solution, right? I mean, it's a way to become more efficient and effective, but ultimately, it's also a way to really distinguish professionals who embrace technology versus those who don't, right? I mean, maybe now somebody that is tech savvy, knows this stuff, can finish a task in an hour that would take, maybe another attorney 10 hours, right? Simply because they're able to get to the answer that much quicker or get things drafted that much quicker by using that technology, right? I mean, it's if it's the way of the future. Right? To the next question, how do you think AI is going to impact our future?
That's it's a really good question. I think, on one hand, there's just the practical aspects of how does it impact my day? How does it make me more efficient so I can do more of the things that I want to do outside of work or otherwise? But then there's also just the, kind of privacy, security, how much, if you're asked in a depot, what did you do to prepare for today's depot? Did you Google anything? Did you research anything? How much is discoverable and how far back does your history go? How much is your phone kind of taking all of this in of what you're searching? There's a lot of unanswered questions that remain at large right now, but I think I'm optimistic, and I think that, things can be a tool or a weapon. And I think that this is a very valuable tool that will ultimately make everyone more efficient and will improve our daily life. At least that's what I'm hoping.
Right. I think that there's a fear, like there's 2 different edges of this, where one, on the kind of the simple side of it, is that this is going to turn into like just a search engine 2.0, like a Google Extreme, right? Where instead of going on, be it Google, you'd go on to Bard. And instead of just asking and then searching and researching yourself to figure out what's the best one to select, it's culling that data and giving you the most relevant answer, right? It's just search engine 2.0. There's the other side of it where people are concerned that this could get to the point where it's actually replacing people, where it's
Right.
making those decisions. And I'm not convinced of that. I mean, not currently. I mean, that being said, I was incredibly skeptical of the power of this technology when people were initially telling me about it. And then I started playing around with it, and it was really an eye-opening experience because it is that wildly incredible. But no, I mean, I don't think this replaces at this point, or frankly, probably ever will, the human decision engine. But it's something that is way more powerful than search engine capabilities. And think how much people rely on search engines now. How many times you type something into Google every day, right?
Mhm.
All the time, or Westlaw, whatever database that we're talking about.
Right. And there's actually a very interesting, it's a podcast episode, but it's between Tristan Harris and Esther Perel, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with Esther Perel. I mean, you could Google her and listen to her TED Talk. She's an amazing psychologist. I think she's a therapist, but she's talking about she was so booked up and someone was trying to schedule a therapy session with her and she was too booked up that this guy, he basically created a whole, he took all of her work and all of her TED Talks and created an artificial intelligence model of Esther Perel and wrote Esther Perel to say, I thank you so much. Like your work really helped me. And she's thinking, I didn't even meet with you. I didn't even, so in that way, is it, you kind of run into copyright issues of well, I mean, he took this whole body of literature that she did write and create this model that when he talks to this model, he's getting the same kind of feedback that Esther Perel would give her. So it's an interesting kind of example of the extent to which AI can replace someone. But I think what you were getting at earlier, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I don't think it's a wholesale replacement of people. But again, it is a tool that, is going to make all of our lives better.
Yeah, and another question I was going to ask later, but I'll just jump into it now because it's obviously kind of a perfect segue, is what ethical considerations do we need to mull over as we consider implementing more AI technology? Because, I mean, I guess I think about just like what you said, right? Kind of taking over someone's person and creating an artificial person with their materials. Similarly speaking, you could easily, we spend, our firm writes a dozen blog posts, very well thought out, researched posts every single month. And we actually did a blog post where we had ChatGPT write the blog post. It was quite good. Interestingly, Gary Wickard kind of took the lead on that. And most of the blog post was rewording of stuff he had already written, since most subrogation blog posts are, a lot of them are written by Gary. But plagiarism must have a huge impact on this because it's not like the machine learning technology or the AI in general is building out from scratch this information. They're pulling it from many different data sources and combining it to create a final end product, right? Am I understanding
Right.
that?
Yep. And it will be interesting to see how the Supreme Court kind of contends with these issues. I know recently I say recently, but it was in May of this year, they had a case about Andy Warhol. And so they kind of touched on, some copyright issues, but the Supreme Court justices are not, I mean, they're probably not even aware of what ChatGPT can do or social media. I mean, I'm sure some of them are, but that's, at the end of the day, it requires human creation. And so when you're dealing with these algorithms or programs or machine learning, that they are learning. It's not, there's no human input needed. It is interesting to kind of see how these contours are reshaped, and uh, yeah, it's ever evolving.
Yeah, so onto the insurance industry, what's totally relevant to our folks here. Now, how do we expect AI to specifically impact the insurance claims industry? I've seen it. I've seen a lot of vendors out there at conferences I go to where they're promoting uh whatever artificial technology or artificial intelligence platform they have. Sadly, most of them are just souped up algorithms where it's just search terms and it's not actually AI or machine learning. But there are some really interesting technologies that have been developed. I see insurance carriers currently using artificial intelligence to call data, right, to look through claims. There are companies that will go out there and use things that go beyond just simple algorithms and actually using, artificial intelligence to search through those things. I've seen companies propose that they are actually handling subrogation claims through artificial intelligence for initial demand letters, right? They're reviewing, the technology's there to legitimately review the claim file, where not the person, the tech is doing so, drafting the letters from what they find in the police report, wherever it would be. Ultimately, I don't think that should replace the human element, but it definitely helps, right? It could cut a ton of time down. And I know that it's way too early to say, hey, what's going to stick, what's being implemented. But it's a new buzzword, right? It was like everywhere you go, they're talking about cryptocurrency 5 years ago. Now, everywhere you go, every conference, there's 15 signs that, reference AI and machine learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I didn't know that. That's pretty interesting. It'll definitely have its pros and cons, but I mean, I also think about it from, the trial standpoint of at the end of the day, what is admissible and how do you authenticate some of this stuff that is, created by, you're not asking someone about, do you recognize this? Were you the person that took this photo? I mean, so yeah, I think it's going to be incumbent on all of us to keep up with this technology and make sure we understand it, make sure that we are getting the right experts who know what they're talking about, who know how to, search your phone and explore the inner workings of these programs. Because I definitely need to understand it before I explain it to a jury.
Yeah, of course. Now, have you seen any other examples of interesting uses of AI or other companies or industries that are using AI for either claims or really anything else?
Not off the top of my head. I'm sure. I think we were talking earlier about the self-automated cars and whether that's kind of another area of where we're just kind of resigning ourselves to technology. But yeah,
and we did a whole podcast on that, and that's actually something I travel around and speak on because I'm fascinated in self-driving technology. One, because it's interesting. Two, because I hate driving and I drive so much to commute. I drove a buddy of mine. He lent me his Tesla, and he had the full self-driving technology, one of the newer vehicles. And he said, "Yeah, I'll take you all the way to work." And I said, "There's not a chance it's taking me to work." Well, got behind the car. Aside from 5 minutes, 5 minutes to the highway, and then basically on the highway, 5 minutes to the office, it drove me an hour to the office, right? It just took me there. I just sat there,
Wow.
monitoring, of course. But also I could have used the technology from door to door as well because it's there. And, it's really wild. I really had to start researching it and looking into it until I started to actually look at the other vehicles on the road. And yeah, you look over every time I'm driving, I see at least one vehicle where I'm like, yeah, they probably have that technology engaged. And it's kind of scary, but it's also interesting because you haven't seen as many accidents as you'd think, right? Frankly, I think that I'd rather trust Tesla's engineering versus Joe Schmo driver out there most days.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even taxi companies. There's several taxi companies in California. There's companies in Europe where they are using fully self-autonomous vehicle technology. And in Europe, I was reading a story about actually Bill Gates was riding in a self-driving taxi. And I think it was London. Don't quote me on that. But that taxi company uses self-driving technology, but it also uses AI in that technology. So the artificial intelligence is working with the self-driving autonomous technology to actually learn the roadways. And then it's machine learning while it's traveling. It's learning the roadways, it's recording the data, and it's getting smarter and smarter and better every drive it takes, which is, I mean, it's a fascinating thing.
Yeah, and I've also wondered too, I mean, like, is that data yours? Or does Tesla keep all of that? Like, does Tesla know on October 11th, Ashton drove from point A to, and those are just more ethical concerns to kind of, keep in the back of our mind collectively of, privacy, security, those kind of things. But
I'd recommend that any listener go back to the podcast that we had. One of our first ones, actually, myself and Joey Darianani with CSA Specialized Services. We talked just about that. And we talked about, hey, what happens with these claims when we're going to see more and more of these autonomous vehicle claims? And a lot of it's actually the litigation. I expect to see this can get super complex in the future is going to be not just like a standard product defect claim where if a sensor fails, that's a product's case, right? Arguably. But when it comes down to the actual technology behind it, well, was it reasonable to have the technology decide to hit the stroller with the child in it or the cow, right? Well, what is the reasonable decision? Well, obviously the cow would be more dangerous to the driver, but any reasonable person that's not a monster is going to probably take impact with the cow over the stroller with the kid in it, right? So there's just so many interesting facets to this that as technology expands and advances, we're going to see it spill over and impact the claims and legal industry from every which way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I guess we can all look at Congress and be a little disappointed in the dysfunction, but the rest of the world is, the UK, China, there's other countries that are finding ways to kind of regulate it and monitor it. And so, we kind of need to do the same with all of these considerations in mind.
Absolutely. And as they say, with great power comes great responsibility. We briefly touched on this, but do you have any other fears about this technology and what it could really do to impact our world?
I try to stay an optimist. I think a lot of my angst centers around just the consumption and kind of mental health concerns of it, or, how much it impacts young girls to look at, a totally unrealistic filter of what, beauty standards are changed to, things like that. But, there's also just kind of the misinformation that, like I said earlier, I mean, trust but verify. Yeah, there's definitely a lot for people to be pessimistic and negative about, but I think overall there's a lot to be gained and a lot of advantages that kind of outweigh all the others.
So highly unlikely the machines are going to be taking over the world in the near future, I'd say.
Right.
So back to my searching while we're talking, I asked ChatGPT, should I be afraid of artificial intelligence? And it gave me a whole write-up of why not. And then it gives me actually a really good summary here that I want to touch on. It says, in summary, while there are valid concerns about AI, there's no need to fear it outright. Instead, it's essential to approach AI with a combination of vigilance, education, and regulation to ensure that it benefits humanity and is used responsibly. Society, governments, and organizations have a role to play in shaping the future of AI in a way that maximizes its positive impact while minimizing its risk. I think that's a great summary, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. I agree.
So we have, go ahead, Anna.
No, I agree.
Yeah, so this is really just a short intro to this. So, I mean, I think we can probably leave it at that. I think it's just to get people's minds moving on this. to get us talking, because this is not going away. This is not a new fad. It's not a Beanie Baby or whatever other trend or fad you can think of. This is truly a new technology that, in my opinion, is probably going to change the world just as much, if not more, than the internet did. Right? Mm-hmm. It's a huge thing, and we just want everyone, to just be on top, but play around with the technology and just try to find ways to embrace technology to make yourself more efficient. Otherwise, we're going to be left behind. We're going to be left in the dust by those who are. So all insurance companies, all adjusters, all attorneys, I encourage everyone to try to find those ways to become more efficient, effective. And one of those things that we found to be useful are current AI technologies. Right, Anna?
Couldn't have said it better.
Beautiful. Well, Anna, anything else you want to add before we wrap this thing up?
No, I would just encourage everyone to stay curious, do your research, and embrace it.
Beautiful. Well, Anna, absolute pleasure. Everybody listening on this podcast, thank you for listening. This is another episode of the Subrogation Support Network podcast. Thank you all for joining.